This Just In, your one-stop shop for all the latest news. I'm your host, Tyra Jenkins. On today's news, the roots of the Black Lives Matter organization and its fight against police brutality. Then later, the core beliefs of the Black Lives Matter movement and a report on the ongoing nationwide protests. First on the news, what is the organization Black Lives Matter? For that, we go to Aya Yusuf with the story.
The phrase Black Lives Matter has become wildly popular on the internet, known as a global movement calling for police reforms. However, the phrase goes beyond just a slogan. It's a nationwide organization made up of a grassroots group and individual branches committed to fighting racial injustice and violence towards Black communities. Black Lives Matter was founded by three women, Alicia Garza, Patrisse Cullors, and Opal Tometi. The group began after George Zimmerman was acquitted from charges despite shooting and killing 17-year-old Trayvon Martin in 2013. Since then, the group has grown on a global scale, with over 40 chapters across Canada, the United States, and the United Kingdom. Members rally under the group name for protests and events, such as marches for police abolition and organizing public resources to help facilitate conversations around racial issues. While there is a broad range of topics BLM supports and advocates for, most of the organization's efforts are focused on combating police brutality on a local and national scale. Police brutality, which is defined as the unwarranted or excessive and often illegal use of force against civilians by police officers by Britannica, disproportionately affects communities of color. According to the U.S. police shooting database, Black people are 3 times more likely to be killed by police, and this year alone, 20% of fatal victims of police brutality were Black, despite only making up 13% of the population. In 99 out of 100 of these cases, charges against the officers involved were never raised. This racial disparity and lack of accountability in modern policing is a focus point for the Black Lives Matter organization, and as such, their name has become synonymous with this fight for change. Back to you, Tyra.
Thanks, Aya. The Black Lives Matter movement generally tends to get backlash from people who don't necessarily understand what the organization is fighting for. Throughout its many years of hard work and dedication, the movement has focused on creating a world free of anti-Blackness, ensuring that every Black person has access to the social, economic, and political power to thrive, without setbacks caused by systematic racism. Black Lives Matter also connects Black people from all over the world to induce change in their communities. The Black Lives Matter leaders recommit every day to not only healing themselves, but healing the Black community as a whole, from the everyday tragedies, such as police brutality, we witness on and off social media platforms. They work intensively for justice and freedom for not just Black people, but, by extension, all people, which can be misconceived by many. Just because the movement's name is Black Lives Matter does not mean that it is an anti-white group, but instead, it's an organization that fights for everyone to be treated equally and have the same rights, regardless of color. Within the Black community itself, the movement represents all Black lives, regardless of sexuality, gender identity, ability, disability, religion, immigration status, or location. With that being said, Black Lives Matter is more than just a single Instagram post or a Twitter hashtag. It's a movement that perseveres through the never-ending fight of injustice, and it aims for the equality of Black people who are constantly facing obstacles in America. Now, here's Maya with the latest updates on the Black Lives Matter protests that have been circulating through mainstream media.
Thank you, Tyra. Protests have emerged across the U.S. after frequent occurrences of police brutality against people of color, specifically the death of 46-year-old George Floyd on May 25th. Mr. Floyd was arrested after a convenience store employee called 911 and told the police Mr. Floyd had bought cigarettes with their counterfeit $20 bill. However, 17 minutes after the first police vehicle arrived, Mr. Floyd was filmed unconscious after being pinned on the neck by the knee of Minneapolis officer Derek Chauvin. Mr. Floyd repeatedly shouted, "I can't breathe." Within 24 hours, the video was spread across social media. The following day, protests began throughout Minneapolis. Day and night, thousands marched for Floyd and in support of Black Lives Matter. The protests have continued to occur over months throughout the U.S. after continuous instances of police brutality in other states. Over 2,000 cities and towns, all 50 states, and 60 other countries have participated in seeking justice for George Floyd, as well as marching for the Black Lives Matter movement. Although the protests were meant to be peaceful, many occurrences of vandalism, looting, fires, and violence broke out from conflicts between counter-protesters, police, and protesters. Across the country, unrest began in many cities. Pepper spray, rubber bullets, and tear gas were used by officers to contain the protesters. Between May 26 and June 5th, AIUSA documented 89 cases of specific use of pepper spray in 13 states, as well as the District of Columbia. However, 21 of these incidents were concluded to be unlawful. As of July 26, lawyer T. Greg Dossett and mathematician Jason Miller compiled a list of more than 830 videos of police brutality against protesters that surfaced on social media, as well as 140 police violence incidents against journalists during the protests. However, this was not the only violence that occurred. As night fell, much of the violence increased. Protests across the country began to be violent, as well as several hate groups participating in the destruction, including the KKK and white supremacists. Statesman News Network reports that violence caused billions in damage across the U.S. Many violent attacks have been televised and posted to social media, yet more than 93% of protests involve no serious harm or damage to property, The Guardian states. Many do not realize that the majority of people who attend the demonstrations are there to stand for their rights and beliefs, and not to create more violence and chaos. These protests continue to occur throughout the U.S. today as communities come together and stand up to these injustices.
Thank you for that insightful information, Maya. That's This Just In. Thank you for watching, everyone. I'm Tyra Jenkins. Please continue to stay safe and take care of yourself and each other. Have a good day.